So let's get on with the event. What we're going to do is I'm just going to take you on a brief tour of our website, just so that you know where everything is in case you aren't aware of particular things. Have a look at paperwork and timetables, and then we will have a look at the Q&As. So at this point, I'm just going to take you onto the website, which should now be coming up on the screen. So this is the Tech Award Performing Arts page, and just so that you're aware of everything that's on here, on the first page you've got the specification and a short guide as to what the qualification's about, and then we have under course materials we have 5 tabs. The first one has got the 2 examples of sample assessment material. We have an external assessment tab which has got the admin support guide, the examiner report, the examiner feedback for the exam series. From this year, the external exam, the task when it's released in January, won't be placed on this part of the website. As I was saying, the secure test won't be available on this part of the website from this January. It's going to be on another part, and so basically all the externally assessed tasks for the Tech Award, for the Nationals, in fact for any of the vocational qualifications, will be on a part of the website known as secure tests. So the easiest way to find it is to go to the search box here and type in secure tests, which will take you to the part of the website. So as you can see here, we've got the BTEC Tech Awards, and down here in Performing Arts, this is where you'll find the task in January. So you just need to be aware of that. There's had to be some changes recently around the security of the qualifications and the secure papers. I'm sure that you're all aware of what happened regarding maths in the summer series. So going back to the Tech Award page, you'll see that there's internal assessment tab that's got authorized assignment briefs. Now there are 4 of them here. There are 2 that have been on there for quite a while, which were looking at the performance side of components 1 and 2. We've now added 2 new briefs, and they both include design, but if you have designers and performers in the same group, these briefs are perfect for you. Because they have tasks for performers and for designers. Obviously, if you just have designers in your group, you can remove the references to performers. What we've also got on here are we've got some support materials. So we've got some OSCE materials for component 1. We then have some sample mark learner work for component 1 as well, at distinction, level 2 distinction, level 2 merit, and level 2 pass in acting, dance and musical theatre, and we're working towards putting forward releasing some work for design 2. There's also some work here for component 2 for learning aim C at level 2 distinction and level 2 pass. If you are doing the general pathway for performing arts, so not the dance approach and not the design approach, but the other approach which covers acting, musical theatre and a general approach, we have now released some new OSCE materials as well. So if you've been on OSCE in the past few weeks, you'll have seen that the materials for that approach have been for 2018. Today we have released some new material which you can have a look at your leisure. So that's the internal stuff on there. We've also got course planners, FAQs, past training content, which can contain some really useful guidance and resources, and we have schemes of work on there as well. If you want to know about timetables and exam timetables, I would recommend that you go again to the search engine and just type in timetable, and this will take you to the part of the website which shows all the information about when tasks are released. So for example, for the BTEC Tech Award, you will see that the information is here. You just scroll through, go to P, and there you will see that the responding to a brief task is released on the 27th of January, and the submission deadline is the 13th of May. The other thing that you may find useful is the part of the website that has all the templates for assignments, for assessment, and for verification. So at the bottom of any page that you could visit on our website, you'll see this dark greyed out area, and in the fourth column along underneath About Us, you'll see BTEC. If you select Teach BTEC and then scroll down to Get Started and the BTEC Step by Step, you will see here on the right hand side BTEC forms and guides, and these are the templates that you can use, you can adapt, or you can ignore. It's also a very useful part of the website because it has all the documentation about standards verification, about internal verification, etc. for you to use. One more thing, and this is in line with some questions that I've been asked today from teachers. I think 3 different teachers have asked me this, and it's about becoming examiners. This is for either the Tech Award or for the Nationals. So sorry, I hope you just saw that. So at the bottom of any screen again, just above where it's with the BTEC link, become an examiner, and then what you should do, I advise you to do, is search for specific jobs. And then if you type in here performing arts, as you can see, I've done that a number of times, press search, and there we go. We have all the things there that are available. So we've got examiners, standards verifiers, Tech Award examiners, etc. So that's enough of the website for now. Let's move on to the FAQs. And the first question is about what changes have been made since we began the spec for each component. And so since 2017, there have been 3 significant changes to the specification. The first one is the inclusion of production design, and it's now possible for students to focus on design in all 3 components. If you should be aware that design was always a feature of component 1, and even if they were doing acting or dance, that they should be able to look at design elements also. But now in components 2 and 3, students can just focus on design without having to do any performance at all. The second point being about the timing of work for component 3, which is it was originally 10 to 15 minutes, but we reduced that to 7 minutes as the minimum. So it's now 7 to 15 minutes. And the third change is about the overall qualification grading, which unfortunately was a decision that was made and implemented only a week before results were released this summer. And I can only apologise for the timing of that, and I do hope that your students weren't too affected by that as a decision. I'm sure that everybody understands why it happened. It's just the fact that it was the timing of it that really was very poor timing indeed, and I hope that we won't ever put students and teachers through that again. The next question is, will there be any amendments with the award now? Well, there is going to be another change, and this is a positive one. I hope you will find, but later this term we will be amending the word count for each activity on component 3, because there was so much confusion last year about the amount of words that were expected for component 3 for each activity. So we're going to be clarifying that, and hopefully that will make everyone feel more comfortable with the work that they're doing. Now, in terms of any other changes, in an ideal world, we would be able to make some changes to component 1. So, for example, we could just make the criteria a bit clearer, and unfortunately that's not possible to do, and I'm really sorry about that. We're stuck with it as it is, but I think with that in mind, we have to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with the requirements for component 1 and what's expected, and so that there's no students aren't doing too much work, and the facts is just the simple fact that students could do a big presentation, and that presentation meets the requirements of both the learning aims. So there's a few things that we can help you with, which may be that they come through the examples of work that we've got on our website, but it may be that it's just there are many different approaches to teaching and assessing the BTEC, and one of them is that repetition between the two learning aims doesn't mean that students just have to reproduce the same amount of work twice. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. There has been confusion in component 1 about the term practitioners, and in the context of component 1, we're referring to any creative theatre maker or screen maker if you've used a film or a video within the context of component 1. And so it's not about, it has to be Stanislavski, it has to be Martha Graham, it has to be Stephen Sondheim. You don't have to shoehorn in practitioners with a capital P to whatever work that you're looking at in component 1. Obviously, if there are opportunities to reference practitioners and the type of work and the style of work being done, any context that you can provide, then please go ahead and do it, and that's not an issue. It's more to do with, if you're doing a play or you're doing a dance which doesn't have an explicit link or a clear link to a particular practitioner, don't think that you have to go, well, there's the nearest one to it. We're talking about practitioners as a director, a designer, a performer, a choreographer, musical director, writer, etc. So I hope that clarifies just that part of component 1 anyway, which leads on to the next question, which is component 1 likely to change? Wouldn't it benefit students who are entering the performing arts to explore practitioners rather than productions? It's difficult to find materials on productions. Also, a practitioner approach would benefit them later on in component 3. I've found component 1 really tedious. I didn't write this, by the way. This was a genuine email that was sent in to me. So I would say, in light of what I've just said about practitioners, if you want to, you can focus on practitioners. That's absolutely fine. But we're not forcing students or you to have to do that. So if you don't want to shoehorn, don't shoehorn. That's my advice. I would slightly disagree with this statement, which is that it would be better to focus on practitioners rather than productions, because of what this component is and the fact that it's an introduction to understanding what the different types of work that professionals produce, and it's easier for you as teachers to be able to find any example of work rather than those that are linked specifically. So if any of you have taught Unit 1 of the Nationals, then it is more difficult to find it. So you can shape the course in this way, i.e. it being practitioner focused, and there's nothing to stop you from doing it. It might be that you've selected a work to study that has where creators involved don't have international recognition and haven't yet been an influencing force on other work. So when one thinks about this, the purpose of the component is to introduce students to what professional work is, how it's made, who it was made for, and how it's received. That's why we want students to focus on productions, to ensure that they get to understand what the contributors to the work wanted the audience to experience. It's not a theoretical analysis, it's you start with the production. That's the whole point of it. It's like, let's go and see this show. I'm going to show you a video of this, however you or share it with them. And you're starting from that point. It's like, receive this work as an audience member, and then let's have a look at how it was made. We want the students, and I'm sure that you do as well, to have as much a practical understanding of the processes involved in making this work. And so this person who wrote in said that they found the component 1 really tedious. It doesn't have to be tedious. It can actually be a lot of practical exploration. It can be about finding materials on the productions from a variety of sources. So whether it's the company or artist website involved, it could be the teacher or education packs that are released by the company or by the theatre that that produced or staged the work. There's lots of stuff on BBC iPlayer, on BBC4. In the past year, I've recorded all the work that has been on BBC4 and BBC iPlayer. That is dance, that is theatre, and some top quality stuff from the Royal Court, from Sadler's Wells, like Hofeschter, stuff from the Almeida. There's a lot of work that is available for free that you don't need to go and buy. There are recordings of interviews on workshops all over YouTube. I mean, most high-profile theatre companies and buildings are now very social media savvy and will release lots of videos and work surrounding the work that they've done. You can run practical workshops using warm-up preparatory exercises and approaches, different ways of creating performance material, going through the basics of what a rehearsal is, of what a usual production process would involve, relationships between people, responsibilities in particular roles, rehearsing and performing extracts from existing work to develop and cement knowledge and understanding. And all of this can be used as evidence towards what they're doing in component 1. So if you're asking students about what it is to be a performer in Frantic Assembly's work, and you get them not only to watch either it live or watch recordings, but also implement some of the myriad exercises and techniques that Frantic have shared, the students can talk about, I tried this, it was really hard, I can't imagine doing that for an hour and a half 8 times a week. So it's students appreciating what performers and artists do to create their work can all be fed into component 1. Please remember that in component 1, there's no requirement for them to write a PhD. It's a 36-hour component, and it's introducing the students to a range of work. And if you haven't had professional experience yourself, then it's about making links with practitioners, with theatre makers there are tons of people who work in the industry, who work in theatres, who would be happy to help. They are in the outreach departments, they're in the education departments, they will be able to provide guidance and support. It's about you having to do a bit of digging around and contacting them to find out more information. Another way to bring component 1 to life is, of course, to combine it with component 2 and to teach them concurrently. And students can then develop their understanding of how work is made before moving on to develop their own skills using the same performance material as studied in component 1. So there are different ways to do it. I would say if you are finding it tedious, then choose 3 pieces of work that you're going to use in both component 1 and 2, and students can study them holistically. Next question. Oh, actually, there's been some questions that have come in. Let's see if I can answer these now. So the first question is from Alex. Hello, Alex. I've looked at Warhorse, Blood Brothers and Curious Incident. Did they have to talk about a specific version of them for the practitioner? No. So as I said before, Alex, you don't have to talk about practitioners with a capital P for any of them. What you can do is you can talk about Warhorse, and you can talk about the fact that it was Handsprung Theatre Puppet Company, that it's done with the National Theatre, and was it Nick Heitner who directed it? So apologies if it isn't, I'm just freestyling now. But you're talking about all those as they're all practitioners. The performers who are you know, the puppeteers for Joey, they're all practitioners. So you don't need to find someone else. You don't need to go, oh, this is Artodian, when it's not. So it uses elements of, but it's not. It's not an example of Artodian theatre. So the same with Blood Brothers. It's not an example of Brechtian theatre. It has Brechtian elements in it, but it's not. You know, it's not epic theatre as such. Curious Incident. You know, you look at the practitioners involved there: Simon Stevens, Marianne Elliott, Frantic Assembly, etc. You know, you've got some really, you know, big names there, and it's not like one of them cancels out the other. They all just work together to produce that work. So it's the students just understanding that this is the work, it's brilliant, look who was involved in it, what did they do. We have to imagine that students don't know anything, and that students have been brought up on a diet of Hollyoaks and Netflix, and therefore they've got no idea how live theatre is made and how it's created. Lee has asked the question, I've used productions by local professional companies, one being TIE. We have named the writer and director as practitioners. Is this okay? Yes, it's absolutely fine. Totally fine. Right, lovely. Okay, so the next question is, do students need to provide evidence in their assessments of a certain number of roles, e.g. director designer for component 1? And so it's probably best to consider that you know, if we just look at the examples there. So when we talked about Curious Incident, I talked about the director Marianne Elliott, the choreography by Frantic Assembly, the writing by Simon Stevens. You've also then got some of the performers that could be talked about, and then the set designer for that is pretty significant, as is the lighting designer. But you know, so we need to think of it like, if the student were to watch the production of Curious Incident, what are the things that are calling out to them? What are the things that they're crying out about? Like, how did they make that set where light and set is so intertwined and so integral to communicating meaning? So I would say, you know, you've got 4 or 5 different practitioners who you will be discussing with your students, who they'll need to find out about. Can the student just focus on designing each component? Do they need to work with performers? Well, wherever possible, design students should work with performers. If there's none in the group, then it could be students from other year groups. It could be in a whole school production. It is possible to run the course without performers in components 1 and 2, much more difficult in component 3. But if you are in that position, then can you contact me about that, please, and we can talk it through further. I'll give you my details at the end of this session. As I said before, we have some materials on the website, that the assignment briefs that we had a look at, that have design in. I also did a training event earlier this year, which was to support teachers who are offering design. And the best way to get to it, I'm just going to take you back onto the website. Here we are. So this is on the subject page. Now, to get to the subject page, at the top of any screen that you're on, if you go to subjects and then see all subjects and scroll down to drama, theatre studies and performing arts, this is a link through to kind of a place where all the specs are. You may not have seen this before. It's got some it's got my details, it's got FAQs, it's got documents, it's got links to theatre companies like Get Into Theatre, for example, which is offered by the Stage. It's about offering students advice on getting into theatre. But if on here, if you go to news and scroll down here to Subject Advisor online support events, I have an event here which we did in July, which is about helping with design. So if you haven't seen that, it's on there. I also made it available on the Facebook group that we run, which is the BTEC Performing Arts Sharing Best Practice, which I'm sure you're all a member of. Okay, so somebody asked about the length of performances for component 1, and how long do the professional performances have to be, and how long do all the workshops need to be? So just a bit of clarification here then. There's no preferred length to the works that you show them in component 1. If you're introducing students to a range of work which can be across more than one discipline, and it can be in different styles. So for example, you might look at a play like Punk Rock by Simon Stevens. Already spoke about him today, but that's a 2-hour play. A contemporary play such as Swallow by Steph Smith, which is 55 minutes, and then an autobiographical solo work by someone like Bryony Kimmings that lasts about 90 minutes. If you're doing dance, it could be that you do an 8-minute Beyonce video, you do a 30-minute The Rite of Spring performance, and then you do a 70-minute Pina Bausch work. For component 1, students don't need to submit evidence of workshops. They can do, especially if the workshops it kind of have a question and answer session, or it allows the students to be able to express how they've analysed what they're doing. But if you are doing a workshop, it could be that that you're spending 30 minutes to 3 hours on the practical work, and not all of that needs to be recorded. It might be that there's a group discussion or a viva where they can talk about what they've learned. It might be a 10-minute clip of small groups working. It might be a 5-minute rehearsed improvisation at the end of the session where they demonstrate their understanding of a particular process of way of working. It might be a skills audit showing them performing a short rehearsed scene. If the recorded workshop isn't providing explicit evidence that meets the criteria, then you don't need to submit it. What is the theoretical content behind component 2 is our next question, if there is any. And component 2 is the development of practical skills and techniques, and any theoretical work that the student's going to do is focused on is capturing the evidence of the practical skill development. We put some examples on the website, which I showed you before. And if you're worried about how many logs or milestones, then aim for anywhere between 4 and 6. So for example, it might be that the milestones that you set, i.e. the rehearsals or workshops that are going to be used as evidence to meet the requirements of Learning Aim C, you could do one at the start, so a kind of skills audit to look at, if you gave them an extract from a work, how well they would be able to perform it, and what support do they need if they're going to go on to perform that particular extract. The next one could be, once the work has been blocked or basic positioning and choreography is in place, that you do it then, so the students don't necessarily know the lines or the moves precisely yet, but they are on their way to the foundations being laid. The third milestone could be when they're off book, so they've learned their movement, they've learned their lines, and now they're focusing on further development and refining their performances, their excuse me, their interpretations. And the fourth milestone could be the dress rehearsal or the performance itself. The next question is, how long should the performance material last for in component 2? And what I would say to you is, wherever possible, please use professional judgment. We haven't stated in the specification how long we want the work to be, because there are so many variables that it wouldn't be fair to do, and it would also be really restrictive, and there's also no requirement for us to do that either. So in our authorised assignment briefs, we suggested 2 minutes for a solo. This is a suggestion, it's not compulsory. It could be that the work that the students are doing, solo work, is really crazy and full on and frenetic and really complicated, sophisticated material, and therefore 90 seconds might be all right. But then again, it might be that they've got 3 minutes of solo work. The focus is about meeting the criteria. It's not about meeting a time limit. That's to say, don't get them to do 15 seconds worth of performance material, everything within reason, but just don't worry that much about thinking, oh gosh, they've got to do a full-scale production. They can do, that's absolutely fine. I would say, in the interests of parity and not making your students have too much kind of assessment pressure, that say like you were going to do a big show, that you just select a scene from it, you just select an extract from it, that's going to be their assessment. That, because if they are doing a big show as well and they did really well in the first 15 minutes but then they got tired after the first hour, that I don't think it would be fair for them to be assessed on the fact that their stamina was lost, when the majority of students will not be being assessed across 70 minutes, 80 minutes. So yes, please use your professional judgment in terms of the timings. Students who suffer with speech issues, how does this affect the internal and external marks, and can there be some compensation? So there is support available for students with existing and temporary conditions. If a student has a temporary condition, like for example they've broken their leg, there are the special consideration submissions that can be made, and that's done via your exams officer. And that can be, special considerations can be applied for any of the components in the tech award. There are also access arrangements that can be applied for temporary and also for existing conditions. The different pathways and options available in each component on the Tech Award means that all students have an opportunity to excel and do well. So in specific reference to this about a student who suffers with speech issues, let's say that it's about limited vocal expression, that student could do a number of things. Develop performance or design skills in components 2 and 3, because that's where this is going to come in, because really the speech issue shouldn't affect the work that they do in component 1 that much. But for components 2 and 3, they should be able to access all the criteria available through appropriate selection of performance material and focus that you give it. A student doesn't have to use their voice in this qualification. They could focus on dance, they could focus on physical theatre, on design. But if they did want to act, for example, there are roles that they could do where they give a sterling performance, but they just don't have either that many lines to say, or the lines are said in a like it's about the character that they're playing, the role that they're doing. So it shouldn't be that students who in this instance suffer with speech issues, they should be able to still access all the criteria and be able to access all the marks available within the qualification. This is a question about assignment briefs and when they should be given out. And for components 1 and 2, they should be given to students when students are sufficiently prepared to meet the demands of the assessment tasks, which means that before any assessment begins, students should be given the time to explore, to experiment, and to fail before they are actually given any assessment pressure. So, for example, if you're running component 1 and you have been given by your school 36 hours in lesson time to teach it, I know that's a surprise, but you never know. It might be an idea to split that time in half and assign 18 hours to pre-assessment, so just teaching, goofing around, getting things wrong, before then moving on to setting the assignment and assessing the students. This question is about teacher observation sheets and whether they're still considered to be supportive and valid evidence. Well, really, it depends on how you're going to use them. And in the end, you don't have to use them at all. So if you're now thinking, I don't know what these are, don't worry, you're not alone and you don't have to use them. They can be useful. So for example, where recording of evidence is impossible, like say for example the students are working in a big group and it's in a really noisy environment, and actually being able to scribble down a few things could be really useful, then that's absolutely fine, and then it can be used. But don't think that if you say for example you've recorded the students doing a little performance and then you think you have to then write a tutor observation record for each one of them to kind of describe what's happening in it and to explain. It's like, no, you don't need to do that, that's fine. The recording is enough evidence. This next question is about clarification of the grading criteria and reliable timings of when more sample work will be released. As I said before, I showed you where the component 1 work, and the fact now is that we've got new OSCE material for the acting. We had that already for design and dance on OSCE, but now we've got it for acting 2 and musical theatre. For component 2, we have the log entries. For component 3, we have 2 examples of student responses. Later this term, in fact, oh no, we're not in November yet, but later in November we'll be releasing some more component 3 material, which is referencing the first exam series that we had in summer, and we're also going to be releasing some more component 2 material as well, so that you can see some practical work. This next question is in reference to component 3. And as I said earlier, preempting this question, we are changing the rules around the wording so that instead of it being 600 words, up to 600 words as it was in the first task, it will more likely be 600 to 800. So there were teachers who felt that their students couldn't express themselves sufficiently in order to meet the 600 words, and we were left with an interesting situation where some students did meet the requirements and wrote up to 600 words. Some students went over, and nobody was penalised as such, because it would have been unfair to do so, and the examiners weren't asked to count. They were asked to do a rough count rather than a specific count. So just trying to provide the best possible support for all students in the first exam. So we will make it a lot clearer this year, which I'm hoping you'll be pleased to hear. So in terms of standards verification, internal verification in the first time of leading the course, we have got some, when I showed you before on the website, the BTEC section, we've got lots of documentation there that I would suggest you read. So if you go back to that step-by-step guide, I'll just take you back there now. So if we scroll down to the bottom of the screen, like I showed you, go to BTEC, then Teach BTEC, scroll down to BTEC step by step. What this will do is this takes you through each part of running the course. So in other words, from registering your learners to submitting the students for certification. So for example, here we have internal verification and the guidance document. We've got the standards verification, and again the document there. So if in doubt, please have a look at this part of the website because it's really useful. Next question is a little bit provocative, I'd say, but that's fine. What is the reason for the paperwork and schedule to be so governed and heavy, unlike rival technical awards? I find some of it unnecessary. Could it not be streamlined? Well, there have been some changes to quality assurance this year with the introduction of the lead SV, which you may have encountered within your centre. But really, we do whatever we can to try to make the paperwork as simple as possible. And sometimes what happens within centres is that whoever, I'm not blaming anyone in particular, but there may be someone who's responsible for it, there may be a lead IV, there may be a particular department who can be a little bit overzealous with the old paperwork requirements. So I would suggest that have a look at our guidance documents. If you're in doubt, if you're worried that you feel that you're doing too much, and you just need to make sure, then please have a look at those guidance documents because they do make it clear what is a requirement. So you could also consider things like My BTEC, which My BTEC does take away some of the issues around paperwork because it's you submit your assignment ideas, etc., through the My BTEC service, and it's kind of the templates are on there for you. In regards to the comment around rival technical awards, the thing is, these all technical awards, so i.e. the ones that we're talking about here, are level 1 and 2 qualifications that provide 14 to 16-year-olds with applied knowledge and practical skills, and they were released for the first time in 2016. These are alternative qualifications to GCSE, but they must adhere to the Ofqual requirements around Progress 8 and Key Stage 4 performance measures. Ofqual are currently reviewing the Tech Award and all our competitors and their Tech Awards too, because they want to make sure that the rigour is as at the same standard as it is for GCSE. So in other words, Ofqual don't want students to be doing better in a tech award than they do in a GCSE. They have to be comparable. So it may be at the moment that you're looking at, RSL, you're looking at Rock Schools Tech Award, or you're looking at AQAs thinking, you know what, they don't seem to have to do any paperwork. It's being reviewed. It will not stay like this. This isn't me being provocative. It's just telling the truth that they will all change and they will all get to the point where they will have to be incredibly rigorous. So it might be okay at the moment, but it won't be for long. The next question is, actually, here's one from Dave. Dave said, will there be a penalty if students go over 800 words, or is it a guide? So what we're going to do, Dave, is we're going to make it really as clear as possible, because what we had in the task this year, in 2019, said up to 600 words, which we obviously need to make a lot clearer about the expectations. So ideally students wouldn't go over the 800 word limit. I mean, if they went over by a few words, 20, 30, then it's not going to be an issue. If students go over by 200 words, there's an issue there around why is it that the student didn't know how to edit and didn't know where to stop in terms of being able to express what they'd done. In other words, before they get to do the activity itself, it might be worth doing a couple of practice runs so that they can really focus on what's important, because it doesn't, just because a student writes 1200 words doesn't mean that they're all relevant and there's no repetition, if you know what I mean. So designers, I would say around this about what designers need to submit. The mark scheme in the SAMs makes no reference to designers for activity 3. So design students will present their design ideas to the invited audience. Excuse me, this is for component 3. So it's the pitch presentation is between 5 to 10 minutes and must be recorded. The design elements may be realized in their group's performance. So students should be able to demonstrate the process of their design ideas from initial responses, research, through the development to the final design. And this can be done in a presentation using parts of their sketchbooks, from sketches, from notebooks, from swatches, from A1 sheets of brainstorming example, and then presenting some kind of final design, whether it is on a maquette, whether it's a set model box or sound recordings with cue sheets, etc. It could be that it's a mask design for one or more of the characters, the same with hair, the same with makeup. Costume design can be a costume plot, list of costumes and accessories worn by each performer. A lighting designing can incorporate grid plans and lantern schedules, cue sheet, prompt copy, etc. I would have a look at that. Have a look at that recording that I did if you have designers, because I've explained everything there. We're also having some face-to-face and online training events this term. There are 2 lots of them. There are kind of like supporting you, a getting ready to teach type event, and then there's also ones called enhancing delivery. So I will just show you very quickly on our website where the things are. So on the website, if you at the top, if you go to support and then training from Pearson, and then please just wait for a few seconds before it loads. There it goes, it's ready. And then if you type in performing arts here, it will automatically start searching, and you will see here, if we just scroll down, that we have some Tech Award events. 2nd of December in London for design, and then London again 4th of December, one in Manchester on the 4th, 5th in Manchester. So there's a few events there if you're interested. Let's take you back now. Oh no, sorry, I'll take you back to the presentation. I've realised, ladies and gentlemen, that there's only 5 minutes left. I've been waffling away, and I realised that I've not got through all the questions that that we have, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. It's probably more important that I answer the questions that you've put forward now. So let's have a look first at Miles's question. So how many characters for costume makeup? So it can be that it could just be one Miles costume design, but and gone into a lot of detail, or it could be that they do it for all three. It depends on how many are in the group. So it's not a requirement, like say there are 6 in the group, 6 performers, it's not a requirement that the student does a costume design for each one. But what would be good is if the student, let's say for example the student decides to focus on one particular costume, they can do that. It would be good as part of their presentation that they were able to explain that they had taken into consideration what the others would be wearing. So they're talking about context, they're talking about meaning and relationships, etc. So they don't have to design for all of them. They can do if they want to, but they should really, if they're not doing, just be going with an overall look and then focus on one in particular. Francesca, will the wording of criteria be made clearer? I think I said this earlier, Francesca, that we're not able to change any of the criteria now because Ofqual won't let us. So when we talk about interrelationships, we're talking about the relationships between that are fundamental. So the relationship, for example, between a choreographer and a dancer. So, and how that relationship works. And if it was say for example, they were doing a musical, you had a musical director, you've got the director and you've got the choreographer, how they all work together, the fact that who is making that overall decision about how the work should look. And in most cases, it would be the director who would be working with the choreographer and the musical director to do what that director wants. So that's what we mean by interrelationships. And in terms of constituent features, we're talking about the elements of the work. So is it working with a script? Is it working with what style of dance is it? Is it that it's the work is prop heavy? It's really about just all the different elements of the work in question that you're looking at. And when you dissect it and rip it apart, it's like, well, that's what it is. That's what it's made up of. It's made of 4 dancers, 4 canes, 4 hats, some tap shoes, some chairs, a stage, a choreographer, etc., etc. And it's all the relationships between them. It sounds complicated as criteria. It's not. It's really straightforward because it's just all the bits and how they work together and when they work together. Dave, you've asked, is there a way to get a breakdown of component 3 marks for our centre, e.g. for the 4 component parts? Yes, I have some good news on this. The first thing is that you, at the moment, can request copies of your examiner mark sheets via Edexcel Online. So you can go to your exams officer and ask them to get a copy of ATSC, which is Access to Scripts Copy, and they'll be able to request that, and then you can have a look at the marks for students. But the other good thing is that finally, at last, we have Results Plus almost ready to go. So you'll be able to log on to Results Plus and you'll be able to view all this information about the breakdown of marks for all your students without having to look at individual mark sheets. Now, the plan was that this is going to be released this week. Again, there's been a few technical difficulties. The team are aiming towards Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. As soon as it's ready, I will send out a newsletter, put things on Facebook, etc., and let everybody know that it's ready. Okay, ladies and gents, we've run out of time. It's 5 o'clock. I'm so sorry. These were the questions that you could have had examples, you could have had answers to, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But if you do have any further questions, then you can contact me. Here are my details. That's my terrible face. That's the phone number that you can call. If I'm about, then I'll either answer or you can ask to speak to me. That's the email address that will soon be disappearing, but for the moment, that's how you can contact me. That's the Twitter account. And of course, we have the BTEC Performing Arts Sharing Best Practice page, which you're very welcome to join if you haven't done already. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope this has been useful. This will be recorded and I'll be able to send you a copy of the recording once it's finished. Thanks to you all. The best of luck with everything that you're doing and have very pleasant evenings.